Hello students. Today we will discuss about GERARD Manley Hopkins, a famous poet of Victorian age. He was born at Stratford, Essex, England on July 28, 1844. GERARD Manley Hopkins is regarded as one of the Victorian era's greatest poets. He was raised in a prosperous and artistic family. He attended Balliol College, Oxford in 1863, where he studied classics. However, because his style was so radically different from that of his contemporaries, his best poems were not accepted for publication during his lifetime, and his achievement was not fully recognized until after World War I. Hopkins' family encouraged his artistic talents when he was a youth in Essex, England. However, Hopkins became estranged from his Protestant family when he converted to Roman Catholicism. Upon deciding to become a priest, he burned all of his poems and did not write again for many years. His work was not published until 30 years after his death when his friend Robert Bridges edited volume poems. Hopkins' idiosyncratic creativity was a result of interaction with others, beginning with the members of his extended family. Born into a devout, high church Anglican family, Hopkins read from the New Testament daily at school. His mother, Kate Smith Hopkins, was the daughter of a London physician, better educated than most Victorian women. She was particularly fond of music and of reading, especially German philosophy and literature, and the novels of Dickens. Her sister Maria Smith Gibbon taught Hopkins to sketch, the drawing originally executed as heading on letters from her home. Blunt House, Croydon to Hopkins' mother and father, reveal the kind of precise detail drawing that Hopkins was taught. Manley Hopkins was the founder of a marine insurance firm. It is no accident that shipwreck, one of the firm's primary concerns, was the subject of Hopkins' most ambitious poem, The Wreck of the Deutschland. Nor can the emphasis on religion in the poem be attributed solely to the mother's influence. Manley Hopkins was a devout high church Anglican who taught Sunday school at St. John's in Hampstead, where he was church warden. He loved music and literature, passing on his fondness for puns and wordplay to his son Gerald and Lionel, and his love for poetry to Gerald especially. His publications include A Philosopher's Stone and Other Poems in 1843, Vita's Metricia in 1849, and Splestigium Poetica, a gathering of verses by Manley Hopkins in 1892. He also reviewed poetry for the London Times and wrote one novel and an essay on Longfellow, which were never published. This concern for art, language, and religion in Hopkins' extended family had a direct effect on the Hopkins children. Hopkins' sister Millicent was originally interested in music but eventually became an out-sister of All Saints' Home, an Anglican sisterhood founded in London in 1851. She took the sister's habit in 1878. Hopkins' sister Kate shared her brother's love of language, humor, and sketching. She helped Robert Bridges publish the first edition of Hopkins' poems. Hopkins' youngest sister Grace set some of his poems to music and composed accompaniments for Hopkins' melodies for poems by Richard Watson Dixon and Robert Bridges. In 1864, Hopkins first read John Henry Newman's Apologia Pro Viasua, which discussed the author's reason for converting to Catholicism. 2 years later, Newman himself received Hopkins into the Roman Catholic Church. Hopkins soon decided to become a priest himself, and in 1867 he entreated a Jesuit novitiate near London. At that time, he vowed to write no more unless it were by the wish of my superiors. Hopkins burnt all of the poetry he had written to date and would not write poems again until 1875. He spent 9 years in training at various Jesuit houses throughout England. He was ordained in 1877 and for the next 7 years carried his duty teaching and preaching in London, Oxford, Liverpool, Glasgow, and Stonyhurst. In 1875, Hopkins began to write again after a German ship, the Deutschland, was wrecked during a storm at the mouth of the Thames River. Many of the passengers, including 5 Franciscan nuns, died. Although conventional in theme, Hopkins' poem The Wreck of the Deutschland introduced what Hopkins called sprung rhythm. By not limiting the number of slack or unaccented syllables, Hopkins allowed for more flexibility in his lines and created new acoustic possibilities. In 1884, he became a professor of Greek at the Royal University College in Dublin. He died 5 years later from typhoid fever. Although his poems were never published during his lifetime, his friend poet Robert Bridges edited a volume of Hopkins' poem that first appeared in 1918. In addition to developing new rhythmic effects, Hopkins was also very interested in ways of rejuvenating poetic language. He regularly placed familiar words into new and surprising contexts. He also often employed compound and unusual word combination. As he wrote in letter to Bridges, no doubt my poetry errs on the side of oddness. 20th century poets such as W.H. Auden, Dylan Thomas, and Charles Wright have enthusiastically turned to his work for its inventiveness and rich and oral patterns. G.M. Hopkins, a priest poet of the 19th century, is noted for his originality of style and technical innovations. He remained almost unknown as a poet during his lifetime and for many years after his death in 1889. Ever since the publication of the first edition of his poems in 1918, there has been a growing interest in the exquisite sensibility, spiritual depth, and meticulous craftsmanship of his poetry. His aesthetics is different from that of the Victorians, as it is a poetic principle that attempts to reconcile the immanent and transcendent aspect of the ultimate being. Hopkins' ideas on literary aesthetics and his prose and poetic works have a lot of similarity to the Indian tradition. After extensive search, only short studies have been found on this topic. Like ancient Indian poets, Hopkins was also a meticulous observer of the experience of aesthetic enjoyment and artistic creation. His journals and papers contains detailed discussion of the aesthetic techniques used in painting, music, and poetry. His thorough analysis of the experience of being an art bearer, a striking resemblance to Indian thinking on these subjects. As a whole, G.M. Hopkins is one of the Victorian era greatest poets. He is regarded by different readers as the greatest Victorian poet in realism, of nature, and of melancholy. Gerard was an English poet whose manipulation of prosody, particularly his invention of sprung rhythm and his use of imagery, established him post-death as an innovative writer of verse. Throughout most of his poems, the two main themes that dominated were nature and realism, early life and family. Gerard was the first of the 9 children born to Manley and Catherine Hopkins. In addition to being raised in both a prosperous and artistic household, his creativity was the result of interactions with core members of his family. Both his mother and father were devout high church Anglican who brought their children up to religious as well. Since his mother, Catherine, was the daughter of a London physician, she was more educated than most Victorian women, and she was particularly fond of music and reading. Although his poems were never published during his lifetime, his friend poet Robert Bridges edited a volume of Hopkins' poem that first appeared in 1918. Hopkins was also very interested in ways of rejuvenating poetic language and regularly placed familiar words into new and surprising contexts. He also often employed compound and unusual word combination. So now we have discussed about Gerald Hopkins. In the next class, we will discuss about his poem Sea and the Skylark. Thank you.